Steam rises from a wooden tub in a stone chamber. The year is 1300, and in medieval England, the simple act of bathing requires more effort, resources, and social negotiation than most modern minds can comprehend. This is not a story of filth and ignorance. This is a story of complex rituals, scarce resources, and a civilization that understood cleanliness in ways radically different from our own. To bathe in medieval England was to engage with an entire system of labor, fuel, water, and social custom that reveals the true texture of daily life in the Middle Ages. The myth of the unwashed medieval peasant has persisted for centuries. Popular imagination depicts the Middle Ages as an era of perpetual grime, where people avoided water and lived in squalor. Historical evidence tells a different story. Medieval people valued cleanliness and bathed regularly by the standards of their time and resources. The challenge was not desire but logistics. The infrastructure that modern societies take for granted, running water, instant heat, private bathrooms, simply did not exist. Every bath required deliberate effort and significant resources. England in 1300 was a kingdom of approximately 5 million people. Most lived in rural villages, working the land under the feudal system that defined medieval society. Towns and cities were growing, with London housing perhaps 80,000 inhabitants. Markets, guilds, and trade networks connected communities across the realm. King Edward I sat upon the throne, pursuing wars in Scotland and Wales, while his subjects navigated the daily challenges of medieval existence. Among those challenges was the fundamental question of personal hygiene. The first obstacle to bathing was water itself. In an age before plumbing, every drop used for bathing had to be carried by hand from its source. Wells provided water for many households, but drawing water was laborious work. A single bath might require dozens of trips with heavy buckets, often the task of women and servants. Rivers and streams offered alternative sources, but distance from water determined how practical bathing could be. A village a mile from the nearest stream faced a very different reality than one built beside a river. The quality of available water mattered enormously. Well water might be clean but was often hard, requiring more effort to create lather with the harsh soaps of the era. River water could be soft, but carried risks of contamination from upstream activities. Medieval people understood that some water sources were healthier than others, even without knowledge of bacteria. Rainwater, when it could be collected, was prized for washing. Households with the means to store rainwater used it preferentially for bathing and laundry. Once water was obtained, it had to be heated. Cold bathing was practiced, particularly in summer, but warm baths were strongly preferred, especially during England's long, damp winters. Heating water required fuel, and fuel was neither free nor abundant. Wood was the primary heating source, but forests were carefully managed resources, often controlled by manor lords. Peasants typically had rights to collect fallen branches and deadwood, but cutting live timber was frequently prohibited. The fuel for a single hot bath represented a meaningful expenditure of this limited resource. The hearth was the center of the medieval home. A fire burned there for cooking, warmth, and heating water, but managing fuel consumption was a constant concern. Heating enough water for a full bath could consume a significant portion of a household's daily fuel allocation. This practical reality meant that full immersion baths were occasional rather than daily events. Partial washing hands, face, and feet could be accomplished with smaller amounts of heated water, and was practiced far more frequently than complete bathing. The bathing vessel itself presented another challenge. Purpose-built bathtubs were expensive items, typically owned only by wealthy households. Wooden tubs bound with metal hoops were the most common form. These vessels required skilled coopers to construct and maintain, as leaks would waste precious heated water. Many households lacked dedicated bathtubs entirely. Washing might take place in the same large vessels used for brewing or laundry, thoroughly cleaned between uses. For those who could afford them, bathtubs were valued possessions listed in wills and household inventories. A good tub might serve a family for generations. Tubs were typically round or oval, large enough to sit in, but rarely deep enough for full immersion. Bathers sat with knees drawn up, water reaching perhaps to the waist. Linen cloths were often draped inside the tub for comfort, protecting the bather from splinters and rough wood. These cloths also helped retain heat in the water. Privacy during bathing varied enormously by social class. Peasant families living in single-room dwellings had little opportunity for private bathing. The entire household might share the same heated water, with family members bathing in succession. The head of household typically bathed first, in the cleanest and hottest water. This practice gave rise to the expression about not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Reminder that the youngest family members bathed last, in water that had served everyone else. Wealthier households maintained separate chambers for bathing. These rooms might contain built-in tubs, or space for portable vessels to be set up and filled. Privacy screens and curtains provided modesty. Servants carried water, maintained the fire, and assisted with the bath itself, but their presence was expected and unremarkable. The wealthy could afford to heat enough water for frequent bathing. Quote, household accounts from noble estates record regular purchases of fuel and soap for bathing purposes. Soap in medieval England was a valuable commodity. The most common form was made from animal fat combined with lye derived from wood ash. This harsh soap cleaned effectively, but could irritate skin. Finer soaps, imported from the Mediterranean, used olive oil as their base, and were gentler, but considerably more expensive. Soap makers were recognized craftsmen, and their products were sold in markets throughout the kingdom. The quality and price of soap varied widely, from rough household bars to scented luxury items. Beyond soap, medieval bathers used various substances to clean and care for their bodies. Herbs were commonly added to bathwater for fragrance and supposed medicinal benefits. Rosemary, lavender, and mint were popular choices. These herbs were grown in household gardens or gathered from the countryside, part of the herbal knowledge that pervaded medieval life. After bathing, oils and unguents might be applied to the skin. These preparations helped counteract the drying effects of harsh soap and served as early forms of skin care. Public bathhouses offered an alternative to the challenges of home bathing. These establishments, known as stews, provided heated water and bathing facilities for a fee. London and other English towns supported multiple bathhouses by 1300. They served a genuine public health function, allowing those without private bathing facilities to maintain cleanliness. The bathhouses heated large quantities of water using commercial fuel supplies. Customers paid for access to communal pools or private tubs, depending on the establishment and their means. Medieval bathhouses often provided additional services beyond simple bathing. Barbers operated within or adjacent to stews, offering shaving and hair cutting. Food and drink were frequently available. The bathhouse served as a social gathering place, where business could be conducted and news exchanged in a warm, relaxed environment. Some bathhouses also offered more intimate services. The association between stews and prostitution led to periodic attempts by civic and church authorities to regulate or close these establishments. The church's attitude toward bathing was complex and sometimes contradictory. Cleanliness was valued, but excessive attention to the body was considered potentially sinful. Monasteries maintained bathing facilities and required monks to bathe regularly, though the frequency varied by order and interpretation. Some religious rules specified bathing before major feast days. The tension between bodily cleanliness and spiritual purity played out differently across medieval society. For most people, practical concerns outweighed theological considerations in determining bathing habits. Medical understanding also influenced medieval bathing practices. The theory of humoral medicine, inherited from ancient Greek and Arabic sources, shaped how physicians viewed washing. Baths were considered therapeutic, capable of balancing the body's humors when properly administered. Hot baths opened the pores, cold baths closed them. Different conditions called for different approaches. Physicians prescribed specific bathing regimens for various ailments. The wealthy could follow these recommendations. The poor made do with whatever washing they could manage. Seasonal variations significantly affected bathing frequency. Summer made cold water bathing more tolerable and reduced fuel needs for heating. Winter presented the opposite challenge. The effort required to heat sufficient water, combined with the discomfort of undressing in unheated rooms, made full baths less frequent in cold months. The English climate, with its long winters and limited sunlight, created conditions where staying warm often took priority over staying thoroughly clean. Hair washing presented its own challenges. Long hair, common among both men and women, required substantial water and effort to clean properly. Lye-based solutions helped cut grease and clean hair, but frequent use could damage both hair and scalp. Combing and brushing removed dirt and distributed natural oils. Head coverings, worn by most people much of the time, helped keep hair cleaner by protecting it from environmental dirt and grease from cooking fires. Dental hygiene followed similar patterns of practical adaptation. Medieval people cleaned their teeth using cloths, twigs, and various powders and pastes, Mint, sage, and salt were common ingredients in tooth cleaning preparations. The results were imperfect by modern standards, but the effort at oral hygiene was genuine and consistent. The sweet foods that destroy modern teeth were less available to medieval populations. Sugar was a rare luxury, and honey was expensive enough that most people consumed it sparingly. Clothing presented yet another dimension of medieval cleanliness. Garments were valuable and complex to produce, making frequent washing impractical. Linen undergarments, worn against the skin, absorbed sweat and body oils. These items could be washed more frequently than outer garments, and were changed regularly by those who could afford multiple sets. Outer clothing was brushed, aired, and spot cleaned rather than fully washed. The layers of medieval dress served partly to protect valuable outer garments from the body beneath. Laundry itself was a major undertaking. Washing clothes required the same water and fuel as bathing, plus the physical labor of scrubbing, wringing, and drying heavy wet fabric. Professional laundresses served wealthy households and institutions. The labor-intensive work was one of the few trades open to women, though the pay was poor and the conditions harsh. Drying laundry in the English climate presented constant challenges. Clothes hung outdoors, risked rain. Indoor drying required space and careful management to avoid mildew. The overall picture of medieval hygiene challenges simple stereotypes. People were not ignorant of cleanliness or indifferent to it. They worked within significant practical constraints. The resources we now consider basic: abundant hot water, effective soap, private bathrooms, clean clothes, required in medieval times what we might today consider extraordinary effort. Every bath was an achievement. Every clean garment represented labor. The medieval approach to hygiene reflected not primitiveness, but adaptation to circumstances. The legacy of medieval bathing practices reveals much about the progress of civilization. The infrastructure that makes modern cleanliness possible developed slowly over centuries. Public water systems, sewerage, affordable fuel, mass-produced soap, synthetic fabrics. Each innovation removed barriers that medieval people faced daily. What we accomplish in minutes with a turn of a tap, accomplished through hours of labor and careful management of limited resources. The steam rising from that wooden tub in 1300 represents more than hot water. It represents human effort, social organization, and the fundamental challenge of maintaining civilization. Medieval people bathed because cleanliness mattered to them. They found ways to be clean within the limits of their world, adapting, improvising, and establishing practices that made sense for their circumstances. When we step into a modern shower, we inherit the solutions to problems that our ancestors faced every day. The history of bathing is, in the end, the history of human ingenuity applied to the most basic needs of existence.